Hi, today I have Dr. Simon Moore of behavioral psychologist company Innovation Bubble. Simon, would you just like to outline a little bit about some of the work you do in customer experience?
I'll try my best. Yes, so I work with a team of psychologists who are in the kind of consumer business space. And over the past, I don't want to say too much about time because that gives my age away, but about 20 years, we've worked a lot with kind of retail, consumer, finance, health, looking at decision making and persuasion, but most of all, how those things kind of interplay with things like customer and employee experience.
Yes.
And then I think we're quite interesting, dare I say that myself, in the fact that we I suppose, a little bit different in that we look for kind of non-conscious information, which is quite nice. But we work very much in the emotional space, and we can measure and deploy that information. So we can design, given the fact we're all psychometrically trained, we can kind of build things that measure those things for bespokely for people, and statistically model that, and then predict really the prevalence of kind of underlying factors that might relate to product experience or
Yes.
employee experience, and then sit down, and this is what we actually really like doing, is sitting down with the clients, and saying, look, this is what we found, these are the influencing factors from an emotional kind of subconscious perspective. So what resources do you have at hand? How do we
Yes.
fit that within the context of your organization? It's all very well me saying, oh, these are 10 things that you should do, but what is really, I think, important to do is fit those suggestions within the context of the actual individual company, because 9 and 10 might be irrelevant. They don't have the resources to do that. So why should we be talking about them? So we very much try and fit what we find within I suppose, the resource base of the people we're working for.
But how do you measure emotions and the subconscious, that gut instinct? Because companies are very used to throwing surveys, scales out there, quantitative data, but emotions is a little bit soft, malleable, fleeting. How do you actually get to measure that?
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily agree that emotions are soft.
Okay.
They're quite hard, actually, so they're
Yeah.
quite influential. So what we know from cognitive psychology is that it's probably estimated that probably 80% of any behavioral activity you engage in or avoid is emotionally driven. So it's either something you're trying to keep alive, so a feeling that you want to experience, or something you want to avoid. So feeling anxious or scared,
Yes.
or too excited. I mean, there are people out there who don't want to feel too excited, for example. I know, bizarre, I know, but we're all
Yes.
individuals, but we're very much driven by our emotional experiences. So we have a ton of a two-pronged, given that we're psychologists, two-pronged method. And I often hear this whole debate about the difference between kind of qualitative versus quantitative, and the fact that surveys are quantitative and that interviews are qualitative, and it's an either or experience. And our kind of methods are combined. So we do what we call people landscaping to start with,
Yes.
and given we're psychologists, we do lots of interviews and focus groups.
Okay.
We don't use surveys and questionnaires, because we think that just creates lots of noise, because that only captures conscious. So what do people want to say to you? What do they feel they can talk about? What are they allowed to talk about?
Yes.
What about the questions that they haven't been asked, but how are they going to tell you about that experience, but you haven't asked them about it? So you miss lots of information. So we're very much about exploration, about allowing them to tell their
Yes.
own stories. Where they start their stories is actually quite interesting. We call that cognitive salience, because that gives us clues about what's important and where their emotions are. But we also look at things like semantics and tone of voice, the order of words, pauses, facial expression, body posture. These things are very kind of influential in allowing us to sort of see what is the emotional landscape there. And that's what all that stage is about, is trying to find out what emotions are at play here that are influencing or potentially influencing kind of experience. And then what we do is we then kind of build a quantitative kind of measurement system called emotics, that actually tries to statistically model the strengths of those kind of factors. So the things we find, we try then to kind of quantify how many people have those kind of emotions, or is it by segment?
Yes.
And then the strength of those. And that's really important because that gives us really good kind of basis for kind of activity in terms of intervention. It allows us to really pinpoint what's really going on here, not what people are telling us, but what is really going on, and what do we need to dial up on. So what are the positive emotions that are potentially here that we need to kind of use?
Yes.
They're our allies, basically. And then what are the negative things that are potentially here that we need to turn the volume down on? So we might not be able to eradicate them, because emotions, it's very hard to eradicate emotions, but we can suppress them.
Yes.
So we then at that stage would, once we have that kind of quantitative, I suppose, feedback. So we could do it. We could do a sample of 100 people, or we've done, 8-country international studies where we've had 25,000 people do these tests. And that's really good because then we can segment. We can say, people in Africa are different than those in East Africa, and they're different than those people in South America, and so we can be very precise in understanding what the emotional space is in those regions for us to then, for example, talk to sales and marketing about how we communicate with those people. So it's all about needs and motivations, and that's the kind of, I often kind of wonder and worry about the complexity of this area, the fact that everyone thinks that customer experience needs to be complex, that we need to be talking about really kind of top end, kind of in the sky stuff, when in actual fact, people are very basic. And if you want to enact long-term change, then you need to keep it simple. So what are the simple emotional needs of customers and employees? If you can find those out, then you can actually probably bring about long-term change.
And in terms of, there's a little bit of a trend in the voice of the customer market now about emotions, but so many people use text, or they use scales in particular. How is Emotics different, say, from using scales, a standard survey?
Okay, so Emotics is different because the first thing we do is it's not an off-the-shelf system. So this is why we actually do this landscaping piece, because we need to find out for ourselves as psychologists. We need to investigate what is going on. We can't base any of this stuff on assumptions.
Yes.
We need to find out, are our assumptions correct? Are some of them incorrect? Have we missed something there? If we don't get that right to start with, then whatever money you throw, whatever you build, probably won't stick. And this is why, and companies often come to me and say, well, we've been doing this for the last 10 years and we kind of, get new companies in to do stuff and nothing sticks. It's because they're not using that information correctly. They're not asking the right questions, and they're not testing their assumptions out. And everyone does this. If you've got an argument, what do? You tend to try and find information that supports your argument. The best way to see whether you're right is to try and find information that contradicts it. Yes. If we can't find that information, then we're in a good place. But even if we can find information that contradicts it, that's great, because you know what you need to kind of dial down on. So how do we eradicate those things? So Emotics works it's based on a Harvard system of implicit association testing. So it's online. It's very quick, and that's the whole point about it. It's looking at associations we make with things. And what it does, it differentiates between what you say and what you feel.
Okay.
So two different spaces. And for my mind, too much work is based on what people say, which is a really kind of dodgy position to be in, because what people say and what they do are not the same thing. And we all do it. People with PhDs, they all do it. They all say they're going to do something, or they think in a certain way, but they don't do that. So all humans are the same. But we need to find out then what's the reality. I mean, the best example I can give is look at New Year. How many people make New Year's resolutions with best intentions? Oh yes, I'm going to do this and do that. What, 1 in 10 people might actually do it for a while, and then stop. So why is that? Why do we come out with all these kind of big statements about what we're going to do? Half of it is about ego, half of it is about conforming to society. So it's not just about how it impacts us. A lot of things that we do or don't do are really influenced by the people around us. So the context that we're in, and I think that's missed a lot of the time. This emotional context.
Okay.
So that's what emotics does. So it will actually differentiate between what people say and what they feel, but more importantly, it statistically gives an output of how strong are those things in influencing experience, for example. So, if we think about a brand or a product, we can actually be very precise in saying these are the characteristics of the product or the brand that are most influencing experience.
Yes.
And the emotions that are most at play here when we think about your brand or the product. And so then we can talk to sales and marketing and say, hey, people in kind of, I don't know, Scotland have this emotional signature. That's how you need to talk to those.
Yeah.
But people in Devon have a completely different signature, and you need to talk to them differently. So it's great. It's almost like offering a magnifying glass in terms of, allowing us to be very precise in how we target behavioral change.
And because so many companies will throw a scale at it, maybe, let's make a 5-point scale or a 10-point scale. And what is wrong with standard scales?
Well, I guess, what's the difference between a 4 and a 5?
Yeah.
And people, we know from psychology that people will tend to stick to the middle ground if they're unsure, which is artificial. Also, what we have is this kind of, I suppose, sort of social bias in the fact that people are very guarded about what they respond, especially if it's on paper, because it's recorded. There you go. There's evidence of what you said. So I'm going to have to be very careful how I project that. And the other thing, emotions, are not numbers. So experience is not a number. Experience is a whole gamut of, sometimes we can't describe how we feel. We just know we're excited. How do you put a number on excitement? So, how excited are you? Well, I'm very excited. Well, what does that mean? How do you translate that into a number? Doesn't make any difference. So that's why we do this qualitative.
Yes.
All we need to know is that excitement is an emotion that's influential. We don't need to know the number, because when we do our second phase, we can work out the strength. We can work out the relative strength of influence there. That's where you get your numbers.
Yeah.
It's not artificial Likert scale.
Yeah.
Because
I suppose
we don't know whether that's a real thing or not. We need psychology to work out. They might be saying that, but is that true or not? And if it's not true, then we need to eradicate it from the equation because it's irrelevant.
So when you give a scale and a number, there's a lot of bias in that. People are rationalizing, but you're looking at more naturally how people respond.
And how do you know you've scaled it in the right way? So, for example, there are lots of studies that suggest, when people ask about whether divorce is correct or not, it depends on how you ask it, and you'll get different responses. So if you say, is divorce acceptable in this country, as opposed to should we not allow divorce, you will get statistically significant differences in how people respond. So even simple things like the order of questioning. So if you've got 10 questions and you ask them in that order, you'll get, and then if you've got those same 10 questions and you ask them in a different order, we've demonstrated that you get different responses. What you need to do is allow people just to talk about their experience and then pick up on clues such as, how, where are they starting? What emphasis are they putting on it? What do they look like when they're saying it? Those are the things we need to be kind of clued up on.
More natural response. Okay. Simon, well, thank you very much for your time. Can you just let the audience know how they can contact you?
Yes, we are at innovationbubble.eu, or you can contact me on a general email, which is innovationbubble@gmail.com.
Very good. Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you, Stephen.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Bye.